I love reading the name of Ramallah, Palestine, and the twinning signs when I enter Oxford. The Ramallah Oxford Friendship Association and Twinning had worked tirelessly for more than 17 years to establish this relationship between the two cities. There is a link between unions, schools, universities, art groups in the two sides, including a great project going on and relationship with the Amari refugee camp. The human rights violations for Palestinians by the Israeli occupations and ongoing. It affects children, families, adults, women. It's important to hear Palestinian voices. It's important to make a space for it. In the coming film, the Channel 4 film directed by Akram Salhab, he interviews Palestinians living in the UK to talk about their experience of talking about Palestine, about the difficulties on talking about Palestine that they're facing in the last few years. Following the film, we will have students from Oxford who will talk about their own experience in talking about Palestine.
In 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement has brought Britain's imperial past into sharp focus, with statues falling and mass protests taking place. But are there still parts of this country's colonial actions that remain taboo? As a Palestinian, I've long felt that our history has been marginalised, and more recently, maybe even silenced. Growing up between Palestine and Britain, I've seen different ways in which people's lives and histories are sidelined. In recent years, this has got worse, with US policies under Donald Trump, including moving the US embassy to Jerusalem, undermining Palestinian rights. As an active campaigner engaged in discussions on colonialism, I've long felt Britain has been too silent about human rights abuses, and I wanted to know if other Palestinians living here share my experience. Can you tell me from your experience what it's like to be a Palestinian living in Britain?
You're asked sometimes, okay, where are you from? And you answer, I'm Palestinian. The other person would be like, oh, we shouldn't get too political. And you just said, I'm Palestinian. There is this taboo around it that people that are not aware of it are scared of even tapping into that discussion.
I think there's like an acceptable way to be Palestinian where it's like, I just really like to make falafel and like listen to like Fairuz. But as soon as you want to talk about anything that's real, like, Gaza or the right of return or, international law and human rights, that's like, no, you can't be that kind of a Palestinian.
My experience as someone who's grown up here is this sense of hypocrisy because, on the one hand, my family were made refugees in 1948 as a result of the actions of the British at the time. And the British bear responsibility for that. And on the other hand, when I speak about Palestine and say I'm Palestinian, there's a complete absence of knowledge or understanding of what that means.
You hear about Palestine, they talk about Palestine, there's a controversy about Palestine, but it's never about Palestinians. It's never from Palestinians. It's never from the Palestinian voice and narrative. At a time when we're thinking about race and we're reckoning with race as a country and talking about colonialism, talking about slavery, for example, and the history of this country and its role in that. We should also be talking about more recent colonial episodes, and Palestine is part of that story.
What struck me from speaking to the group was how prominent Britain's role in Palestine's past, as well as present, remains in their minds. A part of history I find is rarely known by other people in this country. There's been a lot of controversy in recent months about Winston Churchill and his legacy. But for us Palestinians, there's another British Prime Minister whose role has been much more important in the fate of our country. And that's a guy whose statue is just over my shoulder, David Lloyd George. Lloyd George was Prime Minister in 1917 when Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour issued a public statement on behalf of the British government, announcing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. For Palestinians, this was the first in a series of steps that led to the loss of our homeland in 1948. The official Israeli narrative is that upon the creation of the Israeli state, we Palestinians left our homes of our own accord. Avi Shlaim is an Israeli historian and a professor of international relations at the University of Oxford. His research has documented that it was part of a wider plan.
I can summarize the history of the British mandate in Palestine between 1920 and 1948 by saying that Britain stole Palestine from the Palestinians, and in 1948, when the first Arab-Israeli war broke out, Britain worked behind the scenes in order to abort the birth of a Palestinian state. So Britain is very largely responsible for the Palestinian tragedy, and yet no British leader has ever accepted responsibility for this tragedy.
Universities are now the battleground over a controversial new definition of anti-Semitism, with the government threatening to withdraw funding unless it is adopted. It prohibits calling the existence of a State of Israel a racist endeavor, even though hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forcibly displaced in the process, and Israel doesn't recognize our right to self-determination.
The effect is to create censorship and self-censorship because people don't want to be accused of anti-Semitism. What happened in 1948, Israel was responsible for expelling the Palestinians. You are simply talking about historical facts. And the tragedy is that in Britain today, there is no freedom of expression, and Palestinians are not allowed to talk about their history.
Following the events of 1948, what Palestinians know as the Nakba, or catastrophe, the majority of us are now refugees. But it's not just politics, it's also the richness of our history and culture that helps bind exiled Palestinians together. But here too, Palestinians are also facing challenges.
Don't overboil them because you don't want them to go too mushy, you want them to stay firm.
Judy Carla is the author of a successful cookbook detailing traditional and very delicious Palestinian food. But she tells me that getting the book published was a struggle, due to the word Palestine in the title.
No Palestine on the cover, and giving me options to change it to like orange blossoms and honey or something like this, which is great, but not for what I was doing. I wasn't writing a cookbook to talk about Middle Eastern food. I was writing to talk about my grandmothers and the history of Palestine. I remember doing a press event with 15, if not more, newspapers and magazines, and they all had the dinner, and one by one they told me why they would not be writing about my book. They were asking questions like, where is Palestine? It's not on a map. How can we talk about it if it doesn't exist? You're sort of eradicating, again, just dismissing a whole range of people. Where do they go? Who do they belong to? It's got to stop.
But it's not just Palestinians who feel they are being censored. It's also those advocating on our behalf. War on Want is an anti-poverty charity which campaigns on a number of issues such as workers' rights, food security and the arms trade. But it's the work it does on Palestinian rights that has led to several complaints to the Charity Commission. Repeated investigations found no issues to take forward.
There's a really terrifying precedent created when there's silence created around a single issue. It means that there's going to be silence around other human rights issues also, and that's why people who are the victims of human rights abuse need to be able to speak about it. It creates a chilling effect, and people look and say, oh, well, you know, will I be targeted if I speak up in support of Palestinian rights?
Other charities such as Oxfam and Medical Aid for Palestinians have also faced recent challenges from pro-Israel lawyers which were not upheld. And campaigners have raised concerns with training for the government's counter-terrorism prevent program, listing vocal support for Palestine and opposition to Israeli settlements in Gaza as potential indicators of extremism. They say equating support for Palestinian rights to terrorism helps only to marginalize the Palestinian voice and shut down discussion of Israeli government actions.
Free, free!
Supporters of Prevent have told us the indicators would only be considered within the context of a broader set of factors. We Palestinians feel that our people and our country are all too often being misrepresented. But surely discussing history, supporting human rights work, or even just writing a cookbook are all perfectly normal activities in a democratic society.
We're a community that is silenced with really strong repressive measures.
It's a campaign that is directly aimed at eliminating Palestinian voices from universities, not by any coincidence, but by design.
My family were expelled from Palestine. Why are we not allowed to talk about, one of the most recent colonial episodes in this country's history?
Thank you for watching the film. I personally think that the conversation should be not about how much difficult it is to have a conversation about Palestine. It's how important it is to have a conversation about Palestine, how important it is to talk about Palestine, about the situation in Palestine, how important it is to link to Palestinians, to have this dialogue, this friendship relationship, and good understanding of the situation in Palestine. To support this, please link if you're interested, individually, professionally, or as an organization. We added to this film links to websites which will give you information about the history of Palestine, about the current situation in Palestine, and also if you want to make more links or establish relationships with Palestine, please access these and do not hesitate to contact us as well for more information. Thank you.
My name is Haya Abdel Hadi and I'm from Gaza, Palestine, a place where human rights are continuously violated and people struggle to live a dignified life. I was very thrilled and honored to be awarded the Oxford Brookes University Gaza Scholarship. I have been awarded a master's degree in development and emergency practice. My experience in Oxford, or the city of dream expires, has been my first experience outside Palestine. So it was a chance to learn, grow, and broaden my horizons in a historic city. I felt very welcomed in Oxford, and I have met people from different countries and cultural backgrounds. This has influenced my perspectives, and I have started breaking down some barriers in my own mind. At the same time, I was very keen to bring a true picture of Gaza to the heart of my discussions. I felt honored to be the voice of the voiceless and to tell stories of suffering and resilience in Gaza. I believe that my voice can help to change perceptions. Besides being very keen to hear the stories of others, I wanted to tell my own story as a Palestinian woman living under blockade, but is still very passionate to pursue her studies and challenge very difficult circumstances. This is why I feel very connected to the Palestinian History Tapestry Project. This project provides a portrait of Palestinian women's resilience. Through their embroidery skills, they have helped to keep stories alive. Each panel delivers a message about identity, steadfastness, or the right of return. I believe that women are strong, powerful, and they can help to change the world every day. I'm grateful to everyone who has contributed to the Gaza Scholarship Scheme, and I would like to thank all those who have helped to create the opportunities that the scholarship has provided. I hope that this scholarship will continue to support other passionate students from Gaza to come to Oxford and benefit from an inspiring and one-of-a-kind experience. Thank you.
I'm a Palestinian from Gaza, currently based in London, and I've recently become co-chair of the Palestinian History Tapestry Project, which started out in Oxford in 2012 by Lady Jan Chalmers. The Palestinian History Tapestry is a growing work of stunning traditional Palestinian embroidery, which has been the handicraft of Palestinian women for centuries. Something that I've learned as a child and has been passed down, generation after generation. And I think embroidery today has become a valuable way of keeping Palestinian heritage and identity alive. In the face of ongoing military occupation and war, culture to us Palestinians becomes not only a tool for resistance, but a very important and fundamental element in the preservation of identity and heritage. So for me, a project like the History Tapestry, which was created in the traditions of the very famous Bayeux Tapestry, as well as the Kazakama History Tapestry in South Africa, it's a beautiful way of preserving the story of the Palestinian people, their livelihoods and traditions and their struggle under Israeli occupation. We now have more than 100 illustrative panels that tell the story of the indigenous people of Palestine, from Neolithic times to the present day under Israeli occupation. And these panels were stitched by Palestinian women across the occupied territories and in refugee camps, giving us, the biggest collection of traditional embroidery by Palestinian women, recording, the incredible and very rich and long history of the land of Palestine and its people. The nature of the occupation has left the Palestinian people very fragmented, whether under siege in Gaza, in the face of direct military in the West Bank, or isolated from Palestinian society in Israel, or from their homeland, in the diaspora. But all Palestinians have been, able to contribute to the tapestry and to record their individual experiences and their struggles, because the struggle varies, and it is immensely difficult for these different Palestinian communities to even meet one another, especially inside Palestine. And that has been my personal experience. Before I left Gaza, it was almost impossible for me to see Palestinians from the West Bank or in refugee camps in the Arab world, or hear directly from them. But ultimately, our story is one, the identity is one, and our dreams of, freedom and justice are shared. So I do see the tapestry as an expression of sumud and steadfastness, as well as, solidarity. And the project has very much been a collaboration of love and solidarity, with people in Oxford and around the world, showing their greatest support for the struggle against oppression and support for, the internationally confirmed right of the Palestinians to return to their homes, from which they were expelled in 1948, and also for Palestinian women more specifically as well, helping them not only make a living, but also continue to keep their embroidery tradition alive. On the whole, I believe very firmly that preserving culture and tradition and recording history in spite of the grinding daily struggle is a must, and it's a way of really reflecting this insufficiently appreciated heritage.
I have always been a proud Palestinian. This is something that's very fundamental to me. I am very proud of where I come from. When I was younger, I used to get on planes and they'd ask me where I was from, and I'd say Palestine so loudly. And then my mum would hang her head as we got searched for another hour longer than we needed to be. But she never told me to stop saying I was Palestinian, because she wanted me to be proud of my heritage. And I've carried this through with me my entire life. And I've always been open to talking about Palestine. But it's becoming harder now, and it's becoming harder partially because every time you discuss it, there is a chance you'll be accused of anti-Semitism. And this is not because of anything you say, it is because they're using this complaint as a way of threatening you and a way of silencing you, because nobody wants to be accused of hate. And it's not just me. I've been accused of anti-Semitism when I was discussing my own lived experiences in front of the student union, and it was later dropped because, again, it's not made to actually achieve anything, it's made to silence you. And I've spoken to my lecturers, and they've had similar experiences where they've said, oh, we used to talk about Palestine, I used to be very vocal about it, but then I was accused of anti-Semitism, so I stopped. And fair enough, it's scary, it really is. And it's part of an ongoing thing, because they want to silence Palestinians. When I go home, none of the places are called what they used to be. All the names have been changed from the Arabic to the Israeli text has been translated into Arabic and English, so now they use the Israeli names. And they think that if they can take us from our homeland, if they can stop us from talking, if they can change the places beyond recognition, they can forget about us. But they can't forget about us, because we are Palestinian, we are proud, and we talk about Palestine not because we hate anyone or from a place of conflict, but a place of love, because for me Palestine is home. This is where my family is, this is where my loved ones are, this is where my childhood was. So I will always talk about Palestine, because it is a fundamental part of who I am. And so for me, to talk about Palestine isn't an act of hate, it's an act of love and a self-love, and love of who I am and my heritage and my culture. So I will continue to talk about Palestine, and so must you, not out of any conflict, but out of respect for the fact that we are allowed to love who we are and be proud of where we come from.